Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on refugee migration diaspora. So, today we will talk about identity politics in South Asia. Before we talk about identity politics, we have to understand what we mean by identity. So, identity refers to a fluid, contextual, relational, and multidimensional phenomenon. It refers to the social terrain, the historical context, political exigencies, particular interests and aspirations, all of which propel a group to construct or deconstruct a specific identity at a given point of time. Subsequently, group leaders tend to define and demarcate the boundaries of these specific identities with reference and in contradistinction or in contrast to their opponents and rivals in the existing political space. The demographic outlook of South Asia has helped reinforce identity politics in each country in the region. So, each country or each nation defines itself through this identity politics. It could refer to certain communities' values, certain social groups' values, certain outlooks, national policies, which are very consciously carved out in juxtaposition with the abutting or the adjacent nation. So, there is a very conscious distinction in identity that is maintained such that the rivalrous relationship, the oppositional relationship among the abutting nations become very permanent, become they are made to seem very natural and very timeless. And this timelessness and this normalcy of their rivalrous or oppositional nature could very well be contested, because there could be a lot in continuum, a lot in commonality among the adjacent nations, but identity politics of each nation within the South Asian geopolitical scape, it mandates the leaders, the group leaders, to define the culture, to define the policies in such a way that the values of one nation is in contrast with the other, and they are made to seem as timeless rivals. So, when individuals identify themselves racially, ethnically or religiously as connected with a particular group, when they have this kind of group affiliation, they often develop hostilities towards other groups automatically, and they imbibe a sense of superiority over other groups. So, that is also a way of owning one's own identity through very consciously disowning every other possibilities or every other identities. In this regard, Adrian Holiday defines grand narratives. Grand narratives are those that we inherit and that we are brought up with. These are the big stories, the meta stories or the grand stories that are designed to define our heritages and to legitimate the social groups that we are part of. They are a part of the cultural resources attached to particular social and political structures. They form the repository of the culture in which an individual grows up. They form the grammar of a culture. And this grammar is never very neutral in nature. It is value loaded. It basically juxtaposes different identities or different groups, and then adds value to one group as opposed to the other. So one looks as superior over the other. So grand narratives are also the basis for Holiday's what Holiday would call as global position and politics. So global position and politics are shaped through these meta stories of different social groups, and these stories do not have a lot in natural in them. A lot of them, or a lot of these, so a large part of these stories are made up of unverified or baseless myths. And through these grand narratives, one inherits the stories of nations and race that positions one social group in relation to its cultural other. So they are ideological in the sense that they contribute to how we structure our thoughts about the world and how we promote the ideologies of race, gender, and culture. There is a lot of stereotype that fill in these myths that comprise the grand narratives. So, grand narratives in today's world, with the postmodern turn, grand narratives have lost a lot of their credibility. In place of grand narratives, what we have are the personal narratives, which are, part of our everyday experiences. So, we are fed with certain grand narratives about our own cultures, but very often we draw on our everyday experiences too, and these experiences are not very overarching in nature, not very generalized, but they are very layered, they are very complicated, and they have plural meanings, plural significances. So, personal trajectories constantly mediate and filter how we respond to the structures within which we are brought up. The structures meaning the grand narratives, the repository of certain myths within which we grow up. Our personal trajectories constantly filter the grand narratives and they respond to the grand narratives. We grow up to understand that not everything that we learn from our own social groups is true and unverified. We grow up to understand that not everything that we learn about our own social groups, about the myths, are verified facts. So, in this process of understanding life through everyday experiences, grand narratives and their ideologies are and their discourses are understood as a part of the wider environment that we interact with. And we see that even though we want to experience the world through our own reality, certain splinters of grand narratives are irrevocably present in our personal narrative. So, as opposed to the grand narrative, which is a very smooth, overarching, generalized, myth like, repository, personal narratives or our personal experiences, day to day experiences, are usually volatile, they are shifting, and they engage with the question of identity, enable us to reach out to others beyond essentialist cultural threads. So, we also tend to understand the cultural other or the other social group outside of the essentialist value loaded cultural threads that we have learned from the grand narrative, the meta narrative repository. So, we understand people without certain value judgments basically. The overall picture of personal narratives is that of complex, multifaceted and shifting realities without, value loaded understandings. Described by Georg Simmel as invisible anthropological constellations, the concept of borders simultaneously connect and separate, divide and welcome passage, and they involve sites of friction and conflict, but at the same time they are also seen as, borders of hope and new possibilities. So, borders constitute a central human activity and create dynamic sites both socially and symbolically, where mutual exchanges among heterogeneous entities can occur, and therefore, in the border, the otherness, the difference, and thereby this identity positions are constantly being negotiated, they are constantly being revisited and problematized. There cannot be any permanent identity position. Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor has extensively written about identity politics. Taylor points out that modern identity is inherently political because it demands recognition. The idea that modern politics is based on the principle of universal recognition comes from Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, So, philosopher Hegel talks about this principle of universal recognition that modern politics entails. Increasingly, however, it seems that the universal recognition based on a shared individual humanity may not be enough, especially in the case of defining groups and subgroups that have been historically discriminated, that have historically faced a discrimination and marginalization in the past. So, any sort of universal concept of recognition may not be enough to bring forward their grievances, their state of marginality. Hence, modern identity politics revolves around demands for recognition of group identities. So, we are talking about the specificity of each group's reality, that is, public affirmations of the equal dignity of marginalized groups, the groups that have been formerly treated as marginal entities. It could be the Quebecois people or the African Americans, or it could be the women as a category, or the indigenous people, or even the homosexuals and the transgenders. All the categories of people, it could be a geographical group, it could be a group in terms of sexual orientation, it could be a racially discriminated group. Any such people that have formerly faced marginalization, they are claimant to equal dignity. So, the term identity politics, also used in the philosophical literature, predominantly talks about the struggles for recognition and social justice by groups of citizens within Western capitalist democracies. It could include indigenous rights movements worldwide. It could include the demands for regional self-determination, to mention only a few. So, critic Charles Taylor argues that the modern identity is characterized by an emphasis, by a focus on one's inner voice and one's capacity for authenticity. In other words, the ability to find a way of existence that is somehow true and authentic to one's own self. So, regarding the identity and associated identity politics, the marginalized groups, Sonia Crooks points out, I quote her here at length, what makes identity politics a significant departure from earlier pre-identitarian forms of the politics of recognition is its demand for recognition on the basis of the very grounds on which recognition has previously been denied. It is qua women, qua blacks, qua lesbians that groups demand recognition. So, the recognition should also be in a very specific sense. It cannot be a universal sense of recognition. It should be on the same grounds on which recognition has been previously denied. It could be, if it is in the case of a woman, it should be with respect to her gender. Same for the lesbians, in terms of their sexual orientation. For the blacks in terms of their race and color, right? So, to continue with the quote, the demand is not for exclusion within the fold of universal humankind on the basis of shared human attributes, nor is it for respect in spite of one's differences. Rather, what is demanded is respect for oneself as different. So, this recognition of one's specific reality, one's specific orientation and specific existence. What is crucial about the identity of identity politics appears to be the experience of an individual subject, the unique experience of a subject, that is, especially their experience within social structures that generate injustice, and the possibility of a shared and a more authentic or self-determined alternative to such injustice as a way of ensuring survival and self-preservation. So, identity politics rests on the connection between a certain undergoing or social occurrence and the particular subject position to which it is attributed, and hence on a unifying claim about the meaning of politically laden experiences to diverse individuals, right? So, this could be exemplified. So, this could be elaborated with the example of racism. Racism or ethnic cleansing that a certain people undergo or experience, a certain undergoing a certain incident or occurrence, or a certain treatment that is enacted, that is enforced on a particular subject position, that a people have to face by virtue of belonging to a certain geopolitical space, and by virtue of being who they are in terms of their skin color, in terms of their race and ethnicity. If a people are undergoing a certain experience because of who they are, it could be the experience of racism, gendered marginality, or sexual violence. It could be ethnic cleansing. All these social occurrences shape the meaning of politically laden experiences, and they in turn consolidate identity politics, right? It is something that is unique to a certain people. Racism is something unique that the African Americans have faced, which shaped their history actually, right? Similarly, ethnic cleansing is something that the Rohingyas are facing right now. The field of gender studies and body politics, particularly in relation to migrant women and their expressions through artworks, is a dynamic and a complex area of study in the current times. The body as a site of political negotiation often transgresses the boundaries of dominant discourses, and it creates its alternative spaces of order and disorder. Regarding the conceptualization of body politics, scholar Albie Kenny suggests that, I quote Kenny here, bodies are political. The term body politic has medieval origins where states, towns, guilds, churches and families were considered in such terms as bodies. So, in Kenny's sense, drawing on Kenny's definition, body therefore refers to social institutions, social orders. The body politic refers to certain dogmas that rule the institutions. So, the dogmas that underlie certain social orders. The political and social body has been historically understood in a manner that is similar to the physical human body, which is either considered as healthy or corrupt, and therefore such a body is in need of intervention, often through purging and disciplining. So, in contemporary contexts, the body politic can refer to a nation which is regarded as a corporate entity, a state or collective unit of people. Such a body politic directly intervenes in the experiences of those who are subjected to racial persecution, sexual harassment and abuse, gender based violence, reproductive restrictions and disability discrimination, to name but a few. So, body politic refers to certain diktats that are implemented by a body, a corporate entity, and which directly interferes with, directly intervenes into the lives of people in the form of racial persecution, gendered violence, sexual harassment and so forth, depending on the position of a subject, whether a subject is a disabled subject or a woman or a transgender. The body politic would accordingly render a specific treatment to the individual. So, when working with marginalized groups and subjects, what becomes especially pertinent in any examination is how the research practices might reflect, confirm, or else question the existing body politic. How the research brings to the fore the power structures and the political histories that our bodies signify. So, in terms of suffering, when we come to talk about partition literature, we see that partition literature has given us the knowledge of the horrors that the people from its contemporary time experienced during the event, and the kind of horror that the people were made to know, that the people were made to face during the partition. While the impact of the partition was initially studied using geographical and political metrics, later on, towards the close of the 20th century, we see literature emerging that also focus on the human cost of partition, the human impact of partition, the literature that reflect people's lives, the personal access and the personal experiences are explored during the partition, and there is a special focus on women's lives and their grisly, gory experiences. The partition was a gendered calamity, with men being celebrated as heroes in the stories, the men being celebrated as saviors, as national heroes, whereas the women being primarily depicted as victims. So, in that same thread, in that same note, we see Ismat Chughtai story Jade or Roots, showing the struggles of women and how the partition affected their lives directly. We also understand the difference in the idea of nation for the two genders, how men and women differently understand the idea of nation and how it plays out for men and women in different contexts. We see how the meaning of nation is understood differently in the case of men and women, and how it plays out differently in different contexts for the men and the women. How the understanding of home and hearth is very different in the case of the women as opposed to that of the men. So, the short story Roots or Jade by Ismat Chughtai explores the theme of India's partition, while at the same time it revives in its reader's mind a sense of hope through celebrating cultural inseparability among the different communities. And it shows a kind of commonality, a kind of linkage and connection across not only different communities, Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs, but also across the different political ideologies and different political positions that people posit. So, the story begins with a description of the circumstances that are prevailing in post-partition India. The English had left, and while leaving, they had inflicted a deadly wound that would pester generations for years to come. So, according to Chughtai, India was, and I quote Chughtai here, operated upon by such clumsy hands and blunt knives that thousands of arteries were left open, rivers of blood flowed, and no one had the strength left to stitch the wounds, unquote. We would continue with our discussion on Chughtai's story Jade in our next lecture. Thank you.